Hey, this is Dr. David Jockers today, and I am talking about how to improve vagal tone for better mental and emotional energy. And so the vagus nerve is cranial nerve 10, and vagus is actually a Latin word for wandering. And that's because this nerve actually travels from the brainstem all the way down into our major organ system, our viscera. So it has a lot of different functions. It helps suppress inflammation via the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. It helps decrease heart rate. So it helps kind of like a brake on the heart rate, helps improve the tone of the vascular system. So the tone would be kind of the muscular activity, its ability to be elastic, to, increase, decrease blood pressure. In general, it has more of a parasympathetic tone to it, the vagus nerve. It's part of the parasympathetic nervous system. And I'm going to talk a lot more about what that means. But basically, it helps relax the blood vessels more so than constrict them. And it helps increase gastric juices. So that means stomach acid, bile, pancreatic enzymes. If you've been listening to me for any period of time, I'm huge on making sure we get enough stomach acid production. This is a really big issue when it comes to our digestion. We know that our stomach acid needs to be in a very tight pH range. So at rest, it's usually around 3 to 3.5. Neutral pH is around 7. 7 is neutral pH. So it's very acidic even at rest. But if we're going to break down protein, like if we eat a steak, we need to get that stomach acid down around 1.5 to 2.2. So the jump from 3 down to 1.5 to 2.2 is actually very energy demanding. And it depends on activation of the vagus nerve to activate the stomach and the parietal cells in the stomach to produce the stomach acid. So very important for that. Also very important for bile production, to emulsify fats, to be antimicrobial in the small intestine, to help with nutrient absorption, as well as pancreatic enzymes. So very important for gut health is having good vagal tone. Liver health, it helps regulate insulin secretion, which is more of a kind of a pancreatic function, but also helps regulate glucose homeostasis in the liver. So the liver is a main area where we have stored sugar. So if our blood sugar goes down, we're able to increase our blood sugar by breaking down stored glycogen, stored sugar in the liver. And so the vagus nerve helps play a role in regulating that. So we don't break down too much. We don't break down too little. For some individuals, they break down too much because they have poor vagal tone. So they actually increase their blood sugar too much between meals, as their body is breaking down and creating something called gluconeogenesis, where we're breaking down sugar from stored forms. And their blood sugar goes up, and they keep their blood sugar up too much because they have poor vagal tone. For the mouth, it has to do with taste information. And it's also very important for gag reflex, swallowing, and coughing. And that's important to remember as we go forward. There's certain exercises we can do to help improve vagal tone, utilizing some of these reflexes. Blood vessels, again, helps decrease vascular tone, kind of helps monitor that vascular tone and lower blood pressure, helps keep anxiety and depression at bay. It opposes the sympathetic response to stress, and that's an important thing to remember. So healthy vagal tone, it means that we are in a calm and peaceful mindset and mood. We have good digestion and good bowel movements. We have a healthy pulse rate, healthy blood pressure, healthy blood sugar, and healthy body weight. And we have normal speech and swallowing ability. If we have all those things, we're feeling very calm, very joyful. We have good sleep as well. It's not on this, but vagal activity is important for good, really deep restorative sleep, as well as good digestion and bowel movements, good pulse rate. So pulse isn't too high. It's not too low. Good blood pressure. A lot of people, think they have good blood pressure, but it's actually too low. And that's a sign that we may have too strong a parasympathetic tone. And I'm going to go through that here shortly as well. And then healthy blood sugar and body weight. So when we have poor vagal tone, we might have episodes of hypoglycemia, where our blood sugar just drops too low. We get hangry, irritable, have major cravings, different issues like that. Or we might have too high blood sugar and have hyperglycemia and high insulin and insulin resistance and excess visceral fat. So all these things are important to remember. Normal speech, swallowing ability. Again, that activation of the palate and the larynx, very important for vagal. That's a very important vagal function. So that's important as well. You'll find some people that they have trouble swallowing pills, for example, or they have a heightened gag reflex, where it's like a lot of things just make them gag. The texture of certain foods makes them gag. They can't swallow certain things. That could be a sign of poor vagal tone. So all good things to remember. And we're looking at the nervous system. You know, for forever, we've broken it down into really like two major parts of what we call our autonomic nervous system. Autonomic means automatic, right? It's like the part of our nervous system that we don't have to think about. We don't have to think about our body digesting food. We don't have to think about our heart rate, you know, our lungs taking in and exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide. We don't think about these things, but it's all being done, and that's being done by that automatic part of our nervous system. Parasympathetic is kind of like the brakes. Sympathetic is the gas, right? It's the fight or flight. It's survival. It's activation. When we exercise, we're activating our sympathetic nervous system. When we're feeling a lot of pressure under stress, somebody cuts us off on the road, we feel at risk, we feel scared. That's all going to be sympathetic nervous system activity. Parasympathetic is the brakes to that. Helps us put us in a relaxed state. And when we're in a relaxed state, our body can actually heal, regenerate cells, and can digest food. Digesting food is very energy demanding. And so we are not putting much energy into digestion when we are in fight or flight. And an example of this is, when you were growing up, your mom probably told you, don't go swimming, wait 45 minutes after you eat before you go swimming. Why is that? Because if you went swimming right after you ate a big meal, you would get a cramp. And that's because swimming or any sort of, exercise is sympathetic driven. And that brings oxygen, nutrients, blood flow to these skeletal muscles and away from the digestive tract. When we eat a meal, we need to get the blood flow and the activation into our digestive tract so we can produce enough stomach acid, bile, pancreatic enzymes, so we can really break down, digest that meal. And so children usually can go through that process pretty quick. So that's why 45 minutes, it would eat a meal, 45 minutes, it would get out of the stomach, into the small intestine. We'd have released the majority, if not all, of the digestive juices needed to break down that meal. And we wouldn't need to have the vagal nerve activity. And therefore, we can now get into sympathetic mode where we're, doing some sort of exercise. For adults, oftentimes, we've got to wait a few hours. I know for myself, if I ate a big meal, 45 minutes would not be enough before I go and swim. So usually I try to do that several hours between meals, to make sure that I've gotten all the parasympathetic tone that I need to digest the meal well, and then go into sympathetic mode. And this is also why I like to exercise on an empty stomach, typically fully fasted for, a long time. Oftentimes I'll work out around midday and I haven't eaten since, dinner the night before. And I feel really good because, I don't need to have the parasympathetic tone. I can have the activated sympathetic tone, get a great workout in, and then, shortly after I finish working out, eat. And while I'm eating, be in a more relaxed state and do things that are not, overly stressful after I eat. So that way I can really focus, my physiology can focus on parasympathetic dominance and producing the digestive juices I need to really digest my meal effectively. So that's important to remember. And this is a great quote from Dr. Bruce Lipton. You can't be in growth and protection at the same time. So parasympathetic is about growth. Sympathetic is about protection, right? So it's important. Now, to add a little bit of a confounding factor, there's something called the polyvagal theory. It's a little bit, it advances this idea of fight or flight versus rest and digest. And it breaks the vagal tone into two major systems. We have the ventral vagal nerve, which is ventral basically means in a, physiology perspective, it's kind of the front part of the vagus nerve, has to do more with being engaged, grounded, compassionate, mindful. It's kind of the state of thriving. Sympathetic nervous system, again, super important, really key for adapting to stress, right? Adapting to stress, exercise, moving our body quickly. We need higher amounts of blood sugar because we need quick energy. We may not have the presence of oxygen because we have to move quickly. We need to be able to react quickly. So sometimes, fight or flight, you're thinking anger, some of these more aggressive behaviors. And that's normal when we're in sympathetic nervous system activity. It gives us a competitive drive oftentimes, but we should only be in that sympathetic activation for short periods of time. We shouldn't be in there for very long, just short periods of time, like if we're exercising or if we're adapting to a sudden stressor, and then we're able to move out of that and hopefully back into parasympathetic tone. If we don't, if we're in that sympathetic fight or flight for a long period of time, eventually our body moves into the dorsal portion of the vagus nerve, the unmyelinated. Myelination is where we have these myelin sheaths around the nervous system, and that helps conduct stronger, faster neurological activity. So the unmyelinated portion of the vagus nerve is the part associated with shutdown and gives us kind of like a numb, depressed, hopeless, disassociated response. So when somebody hits a point of depression, typically their body has been in a state of fight or flight for a longer period of time than they should. They've kind of hit their point of, overloading their system. And now they've moved into this state of shutdown, or the dorsal portion of the vagus nerve, which is kind of like a hibernation type of mode, right? It's like, which just kind of wants us to rest. I mean, think about it like when you have the flu or something like that. You really can't think straight. You just kind of want to rest, relax your body, and you're not feeling your best, right? So it's kind of your system's overloaded. Well, some people are like that when they don't have the flu. They've been in fight or flight for so long that now they have hit the shutdown portion. So this is another slide here that helps us understand this. So the ventral vagal activation, kind of your attitude is, I'm feeling at ease and can manage whatever comes my way. I feel empowered and connected. I see the big picture and connect to the world and people in it. This is really a state of thriving. And that's where we want to be most of the time. We're not going to always be there. Certainly we need sympathetic activation at times. In fact, actually can be very healthy, but we want to glide between the ventral vagal activation and sympathetic activation for short periods of time. And as much as possible, we want to avoid dorsal vagal activation. Most people experience some level of dorsal vagal activation at times during very stressful seasons of their life, but hopefully it's just for a very short period and we're able to get back into, the state of ventral vagal activation and thriving. So again, the sympathetic activation, the attitude is I'm getting overwhelmed and having a hard time keeping up. I feel anxious and irritated. The world seems dangerous, chaotic, and unfriendly. And then, again, hopefully we get that balanced and get into ventral vagal activation. If not, we move into the dorsal vagal activation, which is the attitude of I'm buried under a huge load and I cannot get out. I'm alone in my despair. The world is empty, dead, and dark. And we've probably all experienced people that unfortunately are in this position, maybe ourselves at times. And really, it's super important that we're doing exercises to help activate proper vagal tone and move us back into ventral vagal activation.